Hey everyone, it's Andrew. We're on week 5 now, and this is when we talk about our API versus our non API, uh, the different narratives. And what's unique about my story is that I am a second generation Chinese American. So my parents were born in Taiwan, or Taiwanese American, whichever. Um, and basically, being second generation, being born in the United States, I have lived in a very traditional um, household where essentially my parents, they're pretty heteronormative and very traditional. My mom is really Buddhist and Chinese Buddhist, so not like a typical Buddhist, but Chinese traditional Buddhist. And my dad is very masculine and very heteronormative and sticks to his gender roles. And so, being in a Taiwanese American family, uh, I have a lot of traditional values and stigmas. So, usually, when I was growing up, my grandparents would ask me, or ask like my siblings and I, oh, do you have a girlfriend, a boyfriend yet? And it's really stick to heteronormative and very uh, what people would call traditional. And I think what's different about uh, being in my specific API family and other trans people's backgrounds is that coming out is really difficult because essentially I've tried coming out to my parents on different occasions and they just don't get it. And it just, the whole idea of transness and descending gender roles just baffles their mind, like completely baffles them. And just, they don't get it. I'll try and explain and be like, it's how I feel, but they don't get it. Um, Trying to explain to my mom why I feel like being trans is one of the hardest things ever because she just can't put herself in my shoes. And even when I ask, like, trying to describe it to her, it's really difficult. And it's not like at this point where I have a lot of family to come out to because the grandfathers on both of my parents' sides um, are really, I mean, they're deceased. So, and my grandma who lives in the United States, she is already, she has Alzheimer's. So there isn't a lot of family to come out to because it's only my dad's side. And it's mostly my mom's parents, my mom's side, who I have a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles who live in Taiwan, and we keep up with them on Facebook. And being API, one of the huge barriers that my fellow vloggers had mentioned was the language barrier, and that's really true for me because I grew up speaking Mandarin Chinese in the household, and my parents are really fluent with Mandarin Chinese, and they aren't as fluent in English, but they're proficient and they understand English. But trying to come out to my parents who don't know what transgender means, and essentially the Chinese language itself that describes transgender is not a good. There are a lot of negative connotations for trans in the Chinese language. So, for instance, in Chinese, transgender means monster, which means ren yao. And when I first heard it, I was really, really turned off about coming out because essentially my parents are making a joke about it, about how transsexuals, they dress up in Thailand just to have sex or as prostitutes, and just basically the whole portrayal, the media portrayal of transgender people and in Taiwan and in China is a joke. And so that it it just doesn't give a good leeway to coming out in the household. Essentially, my dad my whole coming out experience with my dad was pretty negative because essentially, basically he called all of it pretending and trying to be cool and everything. So that's kind of the API background that I get at home, and a lot of it is reputation too because my dad. I know my dad is he really is concerned about his reputation, and even in this winter break when I was you know working at a Chinese restaurant. So working at a Chinese restaurant like for 3 days. But my first day, I thought that my dad would actually be like a little more compromising, and because we had discussed it really briefly at home that he would address me by son, like his son, because I look like a son. But when we went into the Chinese restaurant, because I was supposed to work at the front and answer the phones, he was just like, so this is my daughter, and then he's like, she just puts this, she just likes dressing like this or something. So the way that he all said this in Chinese, but the way that he said it was very embarrassing. Kind of saying like it's not me, it's her, and it's my kid. I don't know, and then says this is her name, and says my birth name when he introduced me. And so the manager, I basically I told the manager, no, my name is Andy or Andrew, and then she was just like, no, that's okay. Like I'm not gonna call you that. I'm gonna call you by your birth name, by what your dad says. And then so she introduced me, and everyone was confused, obviously. And there would be customers that came in, so I'd say white, Jewish, because it was the Christmas day. So a lot of white Jewish people who came to the area. So being like American, they were just like and obviously I passed as male. They were just like oh, who's this nice young man, and the manager would correct them all the time, and then everyone would be confused, and then she looked like a dumbass. So trying to balance being Asian, especially Chinese, because they're just like, no, we're not gonna do that. Like, no, I refuse. And balancing that with and being, trans. I can't explain to her what trans is, and like, no, I prefer this name. Like, and it's just like, at the end of the day, like, the whole not willing to understand, not willing to compromise is a huge problem. So that was my experience this winter break in a Asian setting, and and to the point where my parents kind of want to avoid introducing me anymore, because when I went to the temple this break, my sister was like, oh, there would be like parents that came up and chat with my mom or my dad, and then she'd be like, did they introduce you? Because you're standing next to mom. And I'm just like, no, they didn't introduce me. Like, I was just standing there smiling, but like my parents were scared as hell to introduce me. So them not willing to take the next step and just straight out say, hey, like, this is my son, because they're afraid and of having that confrontation. So yeah, I guess the difference between that I noticed between my friends, not just being API, but being a person of color, is a huge struggle, because all of my friends who are trans, there's the ones who are non-POC, so the ones that are white, all the white trans folks that I know who are my friends have been able to transition in some way, like medically, so on HRT or top surgery, in that, or is in the process. And all of my POC trans friends, they're still trying to come out to their parents. They're still being rejected. And so I think I see a huge split in narrative between the POC trans folks and the white trans folks, because it's a whole system of privilege and the whole different background to battle with, and a whole longer process, because we spend years, or we have to get a job in order to, before we actually get to like transition. And so to explain that to my friends is a huge, it's a huge story that they just sometimes people just don't understand. So yeah, that's basically what I have to say for. I could go on and on, but that's what I had to say for the main split in narratives between the API trans community, at least from my own story and my own experience, and the non-API trans community.